The other day, one of my grandsons was sitting on the pot, and he likes to read while he's sitting on the potty. And I'd given him a book that he wasn't familiar with, so he didn't quite know the story. So he was asking me to read it. So I'm standing in front of him, telling him, flipping the pages. And it was a very sweet book. Um, and he looks at it and then he's thoughtful and he says, he's not yet four. He says, "What an interesting perspective."
Wow.
And I said, "What?" Because I thought I must have heard wrong. But he was really looking at the perspective of what was happening in the book and used the words because he's such a reader. He was able to use this big, not only word, but sentence.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's interesting. See. Okay, moving on. We are, I think the next in queue is Krish Bhatia.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Krish Bhatia. I study in Presidium School in Gurgaon, and I'm in class 10th giving poets right now.
Okay.
So my question
Wow,
to you
thank you
is,
for being on.
we have moved on from the days when the only books for children were Panchtantra. Now we have so much literature being printed for children, covering a lot of shelves in bookshops. Is it enough in quality? Have we really moved on?
Wow, fantastic question. Um, we're moving, we're moving forward. And here I'm going to take the risk because people really criticize me for saying this, but I think it's the truth that in English language, children's literature has moved forward quite a bit, is moving forward. Um, in many Indian languages, it hasn't, especially for teenagers like you. It sort of really dries up. And I totally agree with you. I grew up um, having no access to Indian children's literature beyond Panchtantra, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Jatka tales. And these were never meant for children. They were meant as learning and teaching tools for adults. The Panchtantra is a collection of stories on governance. It's to teach the princes how to be a king. That's what it's about. These are not children's stories at all. And while many of them, all right, fine, but many of them are really not okay for children to be reading. Also, it's changed. Our perspectives have changed so much. So, in the Panchtantra, I've done a play, I've acted in a play on the Panchtantra. And reading through it, I found all the women are either shrews or downtrodden or just meek, beautiful creatures who waft along in the wake of their very much more competent men. They have no personality of their own. And of course, we need to change that. Um, there's a lot of children's literature now in English um, coming out of India. Again, access. I'm glad that you feel that it's filling up bookshelves in libraries and bookstores. I fear it isn't. I fear that it's not enough because I go into a bookstore very often. I try and go into a brick and mortar bookstore wherever I am, and I ask them to show me children's books and Indian children's books, and it's still Panchtantra. It's still Sudha Murthy. It's still, I mean, Rabindranath Tagore. It's still Premchand. And so I asked them, I said, all right, I ask children when I go to school, do you know any Indian authors? And they say, yes, 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 we know Rabindranath Tagore, Premchand, Sudha Murthy, Ruskin Bond. So I say, okay, do you know um, any Indian authors who are not dead or over 70? I've I think I'll have to increase it because I'll be 70 kind of soon. But basically that's what's still out there and popular. Popular, I don't know. And I think that it's popular because you, kids, are not the buyers of the product that we're writing and publishing. We're writing it for you, we're publishing it for you, but you don't have the money power. Your parents, your grandparents, your teachers have the money power. And so they are making the choice for you. That's not fair because they are choosing what they know. But the world has changed. It's as though they wouldn't buy you a hoodie or they wouldn't buy you a pair of jeans or they wouldn't buy you Nike shoes because they didn't have it at that time, or they wouldn't call in for a pizza sometimes because they couldn't do it. But it's so ridiculous if you think of it in those terms. Um, so there needs to be more. And I would really love to hear from all the speakers, from all the people who are asking questions and others. What's the book you want me to write? What are the topics that you feel that you'd like to read about and haven't yet found a book that addresses it? Krish, do you want to think of that? Is there a book that you've been looking for?
Uh, Ma'am, I'm not
Or
much
think
of a
about it.
reader. I'll be honest. I'll be honest. I'm
Okay.
not much of a reader. Uh, but so I don't really have like I did not really search for many choices. But
But
I
okay, if you were not a reader, but you found a book on something and you thought, this is the
yes,
book I want
yes,
to
that
read.
was okay. So I really like fiction, but I also want a little of, you know, realistic things merged into it. A little of, like you can say, a little of facts merged with fiction, reality merged with
Mhm,
fiction. I like that.
mhm.
And I know there are many books on the internet, like you can find some, but I haven't, when I read the back of the book, I haven't really found like a preference of mine yet. So,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
yes. So
I love
I,
reality fiction. That's my favorite as well. And like in reality, what's what's a theme or a subject that you feel should be written about for young people like yourself?
ma'am, the truths of the world, like everything which is true, because for children, many facts are hidden. That is true.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
so I
That's the
want,
truth.
yes, I want like the truths to be mixed with fiction so that every child can understand them in like like in an easy way, and it doesn't feel offensive to anyone. So,
Yeah, yeah. I have a story in this book. Do I have? Yeah, I have a story in this book. This I'm not butter chicken. You can't order me, and it's a story that came out of a truth. I had a very dear friend who had a very violent husband, and she finally took her son and daughter and ran away from there. And um, went to live with her parents. She had a mother who would say to her, "No, you should go back. How long are you planning to stay? Are compromise kar lo?" You know. Um, One day, her son, who was 12 or 13 at the time, came very, not one day, but gradually he started becoming violent. He one day beat his sister to the ground. And when his mother went to grab his arm and pull him off his sister, he turned around and he bit his mother's arm. He bit her really badly. And then he ran away from home and he came to my house, which was running distance. Um, he was crying. And I said, "How do you feel when this happened?" He told me what happened and said, how did you feel? He said, "I feel awful every time this happens. I hate myself doing that." So I said, "Then why do you do it?" And his answer shocked me. He said, "Because I'm now the man of the house." And because he had seen the man of his house, his father, doing this, he thought that's how he needed to behave, although he hated behaving like that. So I wrote a story called Bablu's Bhabi in this book. When I told it to children, first I told it to children like you, urban, educated schools. And one of the things that often was repeated was, हाँ ये गांव वगैरह में होता है. Doesn't really happen in cities. Happens in poor homes. It doesn't happen in our homes. Does it? Does it?
Sure does.
You think? Of course it does. Of course it does. When I read the story, so I knew I had to write another story and base it in an urban setting. This one I had set in a sort of semi-rural, urban slum kind of place. And then when I told the story to children who were from the walled city, much poorer children, in a very basic school, government school, I had told a ghost story and I told this story. Afterwards, all the children went away. One girl remained behind and said, was this story true? And I said, what do you think? And she said, well, the ghost story wasn't true, but the one about the bhabi being beaten was definitely true. So I said, how do you say with so much surety? And she says, because it happens in my house. By which time other children had come back, and many of them admitted to being witness to domestic violence in their own homes, neighbors, other relatives. And I asked them what they felt when they witnessed to it or knew about it or saw the aftermath of it, the bruises, the cuts, the black eyes. And amongst the other things, what they all said is, हम बेबस महसूस करते हैं. We feel ourselves to be helpless. And I knew I had to write a story where children are not helpless because I think that you are powerhouses. You are the instruments of change, not me. And through stories that empower you, you get empowered. It's really like, sticking your plug into a mm, recharge point and recharging your energies, recharging your positive uh, abilities to be that instrument of change.
Absolutely, ma'am. You're so right. Because a lot of times we tend to think like that, domestic violence is a side dish which is served up with poverty. It is not. It is something which is chronic. It is something which is like a disease and it has to be treated like that. It has nothing to do with your monetary status in life. So I think that we need to understand and become, and at least stop being helpless. So that is very important. I think next is Shreyas. Shreyas,
Yeah,
can you please unmute this? Hi, Shreyas.
hello. So my name is Shreyas. I study in Sanskriti School, New Delhi, and I am in grade 7. So I have a question for you. In the world of the one who should not be named, satyrs, wizards, centaurs, vampires, werewolves, and demigods, all the stories where a child is put in a bubble of fiction, hugely successful genre generally, and it's a worldwide sensation. You picked to write about real life, about brushed under the carpet historical events, reality fiction, as you termed it, exposing our children to important and shunned events of our own country. Hats off to you. What made you pick this genre, though?
That's a great question, Shreyas. I think that writers often, or should, I feel, write the story that they want to read. And while I loved Harry Potter for very different reasons than many people did. Um, what I really connect with is reality fiction. a book like, let's say, The Boy in Striped Pajamas. Yeah, it's fiction. I don't know if you all have read it, but it's an astonishingly moving and powerful book which shows you how life can turn in crazy and sometimes frightening ways. It's a really fantastic book, and I was so blessed to be on a panel with the author. So I write what I would love to read. I write the books that I haven't found on bookshelves. I wish I could write that blockbuster mythology turned science fiction turned you know, super duper bestseller. So I could I could be you know, that known and successful. But I don't know if I can. I'm not saying I will never. I may just. Um, and I know that those books are so popular, and there's good reason. It's great. It's just that it's not what I love to read. And so it's not what I love to write. Simple as that.
Yeah, I guess I loved Harry Potter, but I read it as an adult. So I always thought that, oh, the Hogwarts letter missed me. She wrote it too late. But yes, there are times when a dose of reality is very important. And thankfully, a lot of authors are coming up with a lot of realistic fiction, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And let's hope more power to the creed. And I think we have Meher next. Can you please unmute Meher?
Hi.
And
Hello, ma'am.
I also wanted to say why, what were the reasons why I really liked Harry Potter. As I said, I liked them for different reasons than many
Please.
others. I liked the Harry Potter series because she was rejected. Joanne K. Rowling was rejected by 7 publishers before Bloomsbury, and even in Bloomsbury, the editors didn't see the gem that they had in their hands. It was a marketing person who, you know, there's something called a slush pile, which is sent in to publishers, unsolicited manuscripts. That means it's books that you've not assigned someone to write, but they come in. And so everybody just reads them, and it's called a slush pile because most of it goes into the dustbin. But this one marketing person started to read page by page by page and thought, no, this is something special. Called another one of her colleagues, started reading, and they started reading it. By the end of that hour and a half or whatever time it was, there were 7 of them sitting around the table, passing one page at a time and reading it, riveted. So that never be disheartened when you get rejections. If you believe in what you have done, it's right. Second thing is, because why was it rejected? Why was Harry Potter rejected by so many? Because the feedback she was getting was that the storyline is too complex, paragraphs are too large, the books are too thick, the a lot of the book is too dark for young children. They should get much happier, happy. And the sentences were very complex and children would not understand. Great that Harry Potter now, when worldwide or even in India, when you're looking at statistics of book sales, of what genres sell, they have to take out the Harry Potter series because it just skews the picture so badly because they are such big blockbuster sellers. And I'm so glad to prove so many publishers and adults wrong. Don't underestimate children.
That's a wonderful thought. Yes. Okay, Meher, you're on
Yes,
next.
sorry, Meher. I jumped into your.
No worries. We love hearing you. So, though my daughter is in class fourth in DPS Vasankunj, and we have one of your books, which is, I think, so I'm gonna
Oh,
one of your books signed,
lovely.
which is signed by you too.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so yeah. So here's my question: so in our childhood, we had our own wasting ways, going out, playing Ludo, playing gallery, gossiping. Then came the TV, then the cable connection, DTH, internet, and social media. Our wasting aways was shorter, and it still gave us time to read and being compelled. But with unlimited, uncontrollable social media, how can we instill the habit of reading for our children in this world of social media?
Yeah, sure. Sure. It's a challenge. Television was a challenge. Um, I think social media is not quite the demon it's made out to be. Um, because children are also getting to know about what's out there. How are they going to get to know? Look at the number of book related um, posts that you get. And it's not only me who gets, a lot of kids write into me saying, oh, your post popped up and we heard about this book. Where can I get it? Um, I think that this book should have ended like this. Where do you get your titles from? These are actual feedback that I've got from um, of social media, of my posts. In fact, with a lot of children, uh, they do say that we didn't know about you as a writer, but then we saw your posts or we heard your podcast. Because how else will they get to know? How else would librarians get to know? So, first of all, reading is an exclusive kind of activity. It always was. I think and I believe, and so does Raskin Bond, by the way, believe that children are reading a lot more actually. It doesn't matter that they're not reading a cover to cover book. They are reading, they're reading online, they're reading a lot more, they're reading a lot of diverse things. Some of it you may approve of and some you may not. But it's it's the question of access again, which I said that I would keep coming back to. Social media is also a way of access. Reading is a habit. Do it often enough and you can't do without it. If the child sees you reading, laughing with a book, if he sees you, if you've had in his early years a lap time where you're lovingly holding your book and reading him a story, telling him a story, or if you've challenged your child by saying, you know, I'm not butter chicken. What a weird title of a book. What do you think it's about? And the child starts saying, I think the book would be about this, what? It could be something completely strange. Um, and I said, okay, should we find out what the book is really about? Or say that, I said, this book and this story ends like this. Um, I don't know. Did you like it? I'm not sure I liked it. Should we think of another ending? Or get them to stop reading a book halfway through and say, write an ending, read and make up an ending of how the book finishes, and then go back and say, okay, what did the author think? How did they finish it? Whose may be better? And their ending may be much more satisfying to them. And so, in the book, whether it's in a library or in your home, on the last page, on these end papers, get them either to write it or staple in their own ending, give them a sense of ownership of that book. So this book, Unmasked, Unmasked is stories of the pandemic. And I wrote it during the pandemic, and I thought I would call it COVID's 19, and there would be 19 stories because everybody and everyone was bound together by COVID. So I wanted 19 stories, but I couldn't get a hook to hang the book on as a whole, even if it's a collection of diverse short stories. There should be something which holds it together, right? I was doing a writing workshop, and a 13 or maybe 12-year-old at that time wrote an absolutely stunning poem in that called What Would You Do? Her name is Jia Pardal. She was 13 years old. And it was about the migrants who walked home, and many died on their way home during the pandemic when they were suddenly out of jobs and they were suddenly out of any means of earning money or going out to buy food. And so they thought it would be better to go home. And so here she wrote, uh, there they were walking in groups, thinking nothing. For if you are stranded, unknown city, unkind people, no food, ask yourself, what would you do? You'll simply pick up your bags um, like them, rest in rags like them, pick up your food scraps like them, do menial work like them. For if you are stranded, unknown city, unkind people, no food, no shelter, ask yourself, what would you do? It goes on and it still gives me goosebumps, this. And they're beautiful illustrations by Priya Kurian. So I thought, while I was writing this book, I started with a child's voice. And everybody in the world has had a COVID experience. No one has been untouched by it. And so the 19th story is your COVID story. And there are blank pages at the end. So when you get this book, you read a child's voice first, then you read these interwoven, interlinked stories that are through this, and then you write your own COVID story or poem. And so each copy becomes a unique copy of this title. Um, I don't know why I started to tell that, but uh, what was the question? Sorry. I,
Absolutely. Wow. I think so. It's,
I,
instilling, just it's a curious child at the end of the day. And just to ensure to, make him, of course, answer all the questions, but
yeah.
I think it's beautiful the way you've said it. Mm.
Thank you
Thank
very much,
you.
ma'am. And thank you for sharing that lovely poem. And yes, you're right. It gives you goosebumps because
Mm.
because honestly, you don't know what would you do.
Yeah.
Possibly the same thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
And
so I turned the book around to all these challenges, and each person asks that question. What should I do? What can I do? What should I do? Each of the stories really asks that question.